Good morning, Pat Martin.
Good morning, Peg O'Flynn.
You look lovely. Thank you for coming. And you just were at exercise? Is that what
That's
you were
right,
doing?
Tai Chi.
Tai Chi. Very good. That slows you down.
We do that twice a week.
Oh, very good. That keeps you going.
Yes,
that
it
keeps
does.
your mind active.
Right.
That's good. All right, you're going to tell your story. We're going to do it. You're going to tell your story and highlights from your life, what you think we'd like to know. I really don't know a lot about you. So you tell your upbringing, where you grew up, your parents, siblings, how many you had, where they might be, and then how did you get, to the Adrian Dominican. So you can just begin, and I'll kind of interrupt every once in a while, okay?
All right.
Oh, you interrupt me as well. Okay.
I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I was baptized in St. Bridget's Parish, and when I was 7 years old, we moved to the farm. Maybe I need to tell you a little bit about my mother and dad. Mom was born in Cumberland, or lived in Cumberland, Maryland. I think she was born there. And my dad was from Wheeling, from Moorfield, West Virginia. And it seems kind of in God's plan that they should meet. And that they were married at St. Peter and Paul Parish in Cumberland. And my dad had been working in Detroit, although he was raised on the farm. And
in Michigan, he was raised on a farm?
No, in West Virginia.
West Virginia,
he was,
okay.
Right. And in 1936, there were 7 in our family. And
7 brothers and sisters.
Yes. 3 brothers and 4, and there were only 2 brothers. My youngest brother was born in 1941 when we lived on the farm. So,
okay. And where do you come in that long line of siblings?
I am the second oldest. I have an older brother.
Okay. Okay. So he came to Detroit when there were 7 of you?
When my parents married,
oh, okay.
They had my dad had purchased a home on Appeline.
Okay.
And we, as I said, we were baptized in St. Bridget's. And when I was 5 years old, I started first grade. And then during my first year at St. Bridget's, I received my first communion, and I was also confirmed by Bishop Gallagher.
Yes.
And then at the end of that school year, my father was laid off for the summer, as auto workers are.
Oh.
And
that's hard when you've got a large family that you're responsible for, not to have the income.
That's right.
Yeah. So what happened?
And so my dad, being raised on a farm, felt that maybe he could provide a better livelihood on the farm. So we had looked at a couple farms, and there was this farm in Lenawee County that the man was interested in a home in Detroit. And so we assumed his mortgage. Of course, in 36, that was still Depression time. And but my dad had hoped that maybe when he got back to work, he would be able to continue his job in Detroit. And he had made arrangements with a neighbor to help with the chores. And as it turned out, he never showed up. And I guess my dad, man of faith, must have felt that his destiny was to be on the farm. And so
And maybe God's destiny was to have you in Lenawee County.
Yes. And the interesting thing is that we had Adrian Dominicans at St. Bridget's.
Right,
and
right.
so Sister Ann Xavier was my first grade teacher. I remember that. So anyway, life really changed when we moved to the farm, because we no longer had running water, electricity, and I went to a little country school. There were about 40 children in school. I kind of sometimes wonder what we did during storms when we didn't have electricity and that kind of thing, but we must have had the teacher must have had some way to keep us busy, so anyway.
So it was 40, it was like a one-room schoolhouse.
8 grades in
one room.
And it seems that we had a recitation bench in the front of school, and each grade would come forward, and of course there was lots of absorbing time too, and I was double promoted, and so I finished high school when I was 16 years old, and
that's because you always had 2 or 3 grades ahead of you, and so you would listen.
Right,
smart woman.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, I went to so during my senior year, knowing that I wanted to be a sister, my mother decided that it might be a good idea. We didn't have guidance counselors in those days, and so my mother brought me to Siena, and Sister Benedict Marie was the Dean of Students at the time. And early on in the conversation, she asked me if I had ever thought of being a sister. And it's something that I had thought of very frequently. In fact, I was raised in a Protestant community, and when I would say I was going to be a sister, they'd kind of look at me and say, well, you're a sister. I have 4 sisters. Oh. They didn't understand what being a sister was all about. But anyway, Sister Benedict Marie made arrangements for me, while my mother was with us, we went to, a novice took us through the college and showed us around. And Sister Benedict Marie told me about writing a letter to Mother Gerald. And so she claimed me as a postulate. Now, it doesn't mean that I didn't have any contact with the sisters, because we had, during the war years, with gas rationed and everything, we had religious studies, catechism, after Mass every Sunday. And, in those days we had fasted for communion, and so it was usually about 1 o'clock before we ever got home and had some, what was always like a brunch,
Yeah.
And we always had a nice meal together on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But since I was just 16 when I graduated, my mother had asked me to stay home, and so I entered in February 2nd, 1946.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. From what parish?
And from your parish.
From what parish? Sacred.
Oh, from Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart
Hudson.
Parish
Right.
in Hudson. Okay. All right. And that was an interesting upbringing there, and you probably know how to run a farm too, huh?
Well, the thing
You're
is,
one of the oldest ones.
being the second oldest, my mother depended on me to help in the house. And my sister Rose was 18 months younger than I. She did the farm work, but I was my mother's right-hand helper. And it really came in handy, because when I was in the novitiate, I was assigned to the kitchen, and I was in the kitchen for 9 months. So
I got out of that. I was an office worker.
and then when I went to college, I got my degree, a master's in nutrition. And so, and then I went to Michigan State for my master's degree, and that led to, later on,
Some of your ministries that you were involved in.
Well,
You were a teacher for a significant amount of years.
29 years.
29 years.
29 years.
And you can't go through all of them, but were there a couple missions that you were sent to that were very significant times in your life?
Well, I think one that is outstanding in my mind is my time at Resurrection in Lansing, and that was in the mid-70s, and we were involved in social justice, and our students were very involved in social justice issues too. And I was kind of shy, and I remember how supportive the nuns were during their, trying to, getting involved in different activities, ministerial activities.
Responding to some issues at the time, what was one issue that you recall that the sisters were supporting, that perhaps all of you were?
Let's see.
Is there some
Well, it's just, I think ministering to the poor was always primary, and we did have, I was at Resurrection, a convent, and I taught at, well, in the 70s, I returned to Lansing. I had been at St. Alphonsus in Dearborn for 6 years, and they had a program in Lansing that was called the Trump program. It was a individualized learning program, and that was something that appealed to me too, and so reaching out to the students, and so I was in the process of looking into working with the poor, although it wasn't meant to be. During the summer that I was no longer teaching, my dad had a craniotomy at 79, and so I was able to spend time with my dad. And then there was an opening in Adrian, and I became a driver, and I did that for 3 years. And it was at that time that I learned about a new program that the American Dietetic Association had, where you could work under a consulting dietitian and not do hospital internship. So I took my registration exam and was able to find a job back in Adrian. I went to St. Theresa Home in Cincinnati. That was where I...
So you were engaged in gerontology and care of the elders, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Is that because you really began that in caring for your dad or being present with your dad?
I guess one of the things that I always remember when I was coming to Adrian, and Sister Marie Urban was the administrator, and I told her about my desire to work with the poor, and I remember her saying, the sisters that you're ministering to are diminished in many ways, and they are poor.
Right.
And
good point.
That was always, an encouragement to me, although I wasn't actually working with low-income people and people with special needs. I was, with our sisters here in Adrian, which was a real blessing. I really enjoyed doing that.
But you mentioned earlier about going to St. Theresa Home for the Aged, and that was in Cincy.
That's right.
Okay. And what was it that you were engaged in there?
I was in charge of food services.
Oh, a nutrition area as well. And you enjoyed that?
I did.
Okay. All right, and then you were here, and then St. Lucy's Convent in St. Clair Shores?
Well, that was a transition situation,
Okay.
and it was when I was there that I learned about the Area Agency on Aging, and they had need for a nutritionist, And so I applied for that ministry, and it was kind of good to be coming back to Adrian again, because my dad was, getting older. And so I worked with the area agency for 9 years. And it was kind of strange. I was living with Betty Dolan in Jackson, and she was leaving. And I don't know, I just had a sense that I wanted to, I'd been involved in the physical nourishment, and I wanted to do something relating to the soul. And lo and behold, there was an opportunity to minister at Queen of the Miraculous Medal Parish in Jackson, and I was the coordinator for ministry to the aging. And when I started there in '94, there were 4 nursing homes that we were involved with. And when I left in 2004, there were about 10 different nursing homes, and we had, I would go to the nursing homes where they had Mass, and work with the Eucharistic ministers in our parish, having workshops for them and those kinds of things. So it was a very satisfying way to kind of complete my ministry in 2004.
And that was such a need at that time, at the beginning there, when we realized in that sandwich generation where children were caring for their parents when they had their own kids, and they had to take care of their parents. And that was a very stressful time. So it was nice that the parishes were able to take on some of that responsibility,
right,
through programming at the various parishes. And then also the Area Agency on Aging was, now there's just lots of different ways to care for our elders. And your loving care for your sister Rose. You are so faithful to her.
Yeah, thank you.
And she's now in
Lenawee Medical.
And you're still close, but
That's
you
right.
don't have the worries that you had before. Vatican II, think back with Vatican II, that was a significant event in all of our lives. How was that for you with all the changes, and did that make a difference in your life, or did you just...
It was challenging. I was at St. Alphonsus in Dearborn, and it was a large convent, 20-some people, and we were with some people who were ready to move forward, and then there were the other people who were kind of disinclined to that, and it was kind of a time of tension for me.
And how did you move? Were you an early starter, an early innovator, or kind of middle of the road? Or?
I was probably kind of in the middle. I was ready to move ahead. I remember helping a lot of the sisters, being in home economics. I knew how to sew, and in fact, I had forgotten that I made Sister Kathleen Theresa a special outfit that she when she made her jubilee, and but as we said, there were some. One of them was our dear sister, Claire Charles. She was not one of the forward people, and I modified her habit for her, and I can still remember Sister Agnes Charles went with me when she was going to be putting on her modified hat, and little Claire Charles looked down and she says, "It couldn't be much shorter."
That was hard for people, that had that long habit, and then
right.
That was
so that was a challenging time, really.
So you were quite famous in those days. You were one of the ones that got to shorten our habits and come up with those.
Modify.
Right, right. What gives you energy and purpose at this time of your life?
Well, I think just being here and that living out of the prayer and presence. The Eucharist is primary in my life, and it's such a gift to be able to go to Mass every day and to be with our sisters. And they asked for volunteers to pray with the sisters in the garden, and I do that once a week. And I am one of the receptionists at Madden Hall. I do that every Tuesday afternoon. So
that's a busy place at times. Sometimes it's boring, I'm sure. Other times it's quite busy down there.
Yeah.
Oh, God love you. That's great. That's wonderful. Now, did you ever take a big vacation? Have you ever been?
Oh, vacations. I've had so many wonderful opportunities. I mentioned going to the Holy Land.
But who was your dear friend that went with you?
Jean Margaret Bowler was a Latin teacher, and she had the students involved in an organization called the Junior Classical League. And with my sewing background, I helped her make the costumes and stuff like that. And I've been so many places. New Orleans, I was there when Camille was pulling in, and so where else was I? One year the convention was in Kentucky, and we had a chance to go to the Mammoth Cave. And another time it was out in California. No, it was in Tucson, Arizona, but Sister Jean Margaret was always able to go just a little bit further. So, and for the sake of the 40 students with us, we were traveling by train, we went to California, and we saw Disney. We went to Disney World and to Knott's Berry Farm, and then we came home by way of Arizona. And I saw the Grand Canyon, so that was one of my memorable trips with Sister Jean. And then also in 1970, she took a group of students and parents to Europe. And I was in Rome and the catacombs, and in Switzerland, and the Rhine River cruise, and I've just had wonderful opportunities for enjoying God's wonderful world.
Oh, that's good. That's wonderful. So you don't have any other places to go? You've been to a lot of them.
Well, I've even been to Peru. I have a wonderful friend in Jackson, Berta Hallett, and she was born in Lima, Peru, and her parents came to the States when Berta was in high school, and Berta's brother and sister-in-law celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, and I went to Lima with her and saw Martin de Porres' burial place, and Rose of Lima, that little hut that she lived in, and in the beautiful flower garden there. And in fact, it was the anniversary just happened to fall on Easter Sunday, and they weren't able to observe their wedding on Easter Sunday, but I was there for Holy Thursday in Peru. So I've really had wonderful.
So what's next on your agenda, on your traveling agenda?
I think I'm just kind of going to enjoy this beautiful place of Adrian.
Yeah. And you have adjusted well.
I have.
How would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a loving person who loved people and wanted to make life as good as possible for them.
And you have such a calming, peaceful presence about you.
Well, thank
and
you.
Always have a smile.
Thank you.
And you just bring that calmness whenever any of us are in your presence. You are truly a gift from God, and your spirituality just is so effervescent and part of you. So you are a delight to be around and to be with.
Well,
and I've
thank
learned
you.
lots about you. You certainly have traveled. And your religious name was Sister John
Martin.
Martin. And why did you do those two? Or your dad?
Well, actually,
John Martin.
my first choice was John Louise, and I most often when a sister asked for her mother, or I didn't say, my mother was Louise and my father was
Got it.
John, and so that's why I asked for John Louise, and I was so sure I was going to get that name that I couldn't come up with. In fact, it was Mary Ripplage in my crowd said, "Why don't you ask for John Martin?" And I kind of chuckled and said, "Well, wouldn't that be funny? John Martin Martin on my tombstone." But I guess Vatican II changed that.
Very good. Oh, that was, John Martin. Okay, well, thank you, Sister John Martin, Sister Pat Martin, very much for this interview. And bless you.
Thank you.